Good morning, everybody. It's great to have a morning session. I'm a morning person. I don't know about
Me too.
you. You too? Okay,
Yeah.
great. So, welcome to India. Should I address you as Lord Baron or?
Definitely not. No, you can call me Ross. That's fine. It's
Okay.
great to be here in India. Thank you for the welcome.
Okay, thank you for taking part in this session. We have a very convoluted topic to discuss, data-driven governance, and how it's transforming lives. But you and I both have a journalism background. You've been in the media as well as in politics, and there's so much happening. So I can't resist switching topics right now. But let's keep the first question to the topic that we have to talk about, which is data-driven governance. You know, in India in the past decade, we've moved from a file and paper-based structure to data governance, and it's transformed the relationship between citizen and government. Direct benefit transfer has managed to reach millions of Indians. It has improved efficiency and reduced corruption to a great deal. Could you tell me your experience about data-driven governance over the past 10, 15 years in your country? And have you been seeing this in your travels abroad about what the countries which used to be labeled as third world, developing countries, middle income countries, how they are benefiting from technology?
Absolutely. So previously when I worked as an advisor in government, I worked a little bit on this topic. And the UK's made some good strides in the way that it uses data in government, but it does have a lot more that it needs to do. And one of the things that I'm noticing is actually sometimes that can be an easier pivot in what's traditionally called a developing economy, because technology is moving at such a pace that you don't have to deal with replacing legacy technology systems. You can build your infrastructure in an up-to-date fashion. Whereas one of the biggest problems we have in the UK is a lot of data-driven government exists, but it's fragmented into different systems, and some of those systems are now basically out of date. But the thing that will change all of this is the AI pivot, and I think that will really bring down the cost of implementing these schemes over time, and I think it can also make the way in which the implementation of data-driven governments becomes more efficient, because you will no longer need large projects to transform the way data is handled. With good implementation of AI, you're going to be able to make those changes with fewer inputs, which could accelerate things, as long as that is handled in the right way in a regulatory sense. And obviously, the safety of government data is a big concern for citizens, and that can be one of the most important considerations in the whole enterprise.
Since you have experience in the foreign policy and security spheres, I think you're a perfect speaker for a discussion on what's happening in West Asia. Britain's position often seems identical to Washington, D.C.'s position. Is the UK still exercising independent strategic judgment? And we in India, are a little confused when we watch Britain, and we wonder about this special relationship that Britain has with Washington, D.C. And we expect Britain by now to kind of break away in some way and not toe the line of Washington, D.C. for everything. But I just wonder, has Britain signed up for everything that D.C. does in West Asia currently?
Well, definitely not in this case, because the Prime Minister in the UK made the decision not to join the initial wave of airstrikes in Iran. So it was an interesting divergence between UK and US policy, although the position subsequently developed, whereas the UK is now involved defensively in the broader operation. But it's drawn a red line when it comes to being involved in what it calls offensive activity in Iran. That's the position of the current UK government. My position is a little bit different. I'm more sympathetic to the transatlantic relationship. It's been a very significant pillar of the UK's strategic approach globally. And also, frankly, that relationship is at the core of the UK's economic potential in so many ways. But much like with India, individual policies can change, and individual politicians in their electoral cycles, they come and go. But what really matters is the commonality between the peoples. And I feel like with India, the UK has a similar degree of affection, of common shared interest as it does with Americans and with lots of other countries around the world. So I think that's the right position for the UK to be dealing with everybody.
True, we saw that commonality for decades together. But the Munich Security Conference last year and this year, there seems to be a rupture in this. The pond seems to have become wider. So what is it that has happened to cause this? And could the UK have played the role of a bridge between Europe and America? Did Europe expect Britain to play that role? And do you feel that somewhere the rupture has been so great that Europe now is going to think of arming itself in a different manner? It's a security paradigm has made such a great shift in the past year and a half. So if you could just explain to me where Britain stands and what do you see the future between UK, Europe, and the US on the other side?
I think you put it really well when you said that one of the things that the UK can do is be a bridge between Europe and the US. And I actually think that that's a role that the UK should be doubling down on. I think it's a good role for the UK to play in the world because the UK is in so many ways a point of partnership between the US economy, the European economies. It's a point of, it's a kind of crossover between Europe and the US. So I think that's a good role for the UK. And my general view is, it's not actually that common, I think, in previous decades. But my personal view is that the UK should be doing more generally around the world. I'm not a UK declinist. I'm a UK accelerationist to an extent. I want things to revolve around the UK's national interest. And I think it's in the UK's national interest to be leading those discussions on the world stage rather than taking a back seat. And by the way, I think that's also very good for India because the UK and India are close partners. And we had a very successful free trade agreement that we just signed between our two countries last year. And there's £4.8 billion worth of benefit to the UK economy from that deal. We saw tariffs really come down between India and the UK, which is a great result. And it's not just about the economic relationship, but the UK and India have so much in common. We have, to a great degree, a shared language. We have, to a great degree, a shared vision. And we have leaders who I think feel a real affinity with one another. And it was one of the wonderful things to see Prime Minister Modi saying that when the UK and India signed their trade deal, it was basically like having a very good cricket batting average, and we have that in common as well. So there's so much to do between the UK and India in the months and years ahead.
That's true. I think the trade deals that India has signed with many countries, including yours, and with Australia, with EU and the others, it's been fantastic. But I think what gave it energy were the tariff regimes which were imposed on many of us, unfairly so, but it was imposed on us, and we had to find new markets, as you're aware. And though we have traditional relationships with many of the countries, like for the EU deal, it took almost 2 decades to fructify. It wasn't working out, but now there was new energy from the EU side, from us. There was new energy from the UK and from us. There was more energy from Australia and us. So it all happened because there was negative energy which propelled a positive reaction to happen. That having been said, many of us who, again, middle-income countries and a large portion of the global south feel that unfair tactics are used, unfair, it's selective in the way international laws are applied to countries such as ours. I'm again going to come back to what happened in West Asia. When it comes to, say, the torpedoing of the Iranian boat, when it comes to what happened with the school in Iran, or what's happening at the Russia-Ukraine war, these are selectively applied to us. You're not seeing the kind of condemnation which is expected from Western nations when they talk about rule of law. Has that rule of law, that term, become redundant?
I don't think it's become redundant, but it's an interesting point that you make, that the concept of international law as a whole is under pressure. And actually, that's felt in the UK, because it's often cited as one of the reasons why the UK internally cannot make certain domestic policy decisions, for example, on immigration policy, that it wants to make. So I think the UK is also, in its own way, grappling with its understanding and the application of international law, to put it modestly. That said, there's no doubt that the Russian invasion of Ukraine was an illegal invasion. There's no doubt that the US says that it has its basis for what it's doing in Iran. I think there's a role for the UK in all of this, which is to be one of the chief mediators between these polarized ambitions around the world. And that's really a positive role that I see for the UK, but obviously it requires quite a lot of leadership, and it requires the boldness to step on to the international stage and to take that role. But I think there's a generational shift coming in politics in the UK. I happen to be one of the younger ones. There are many of my colleagues who are coming through into political leadership in the UK now, and they have quite a different view from the past 20 years of the UK's role. They believe that the UK should be doing more to take leadership on all of these key issues, rather than sitting back. And so, for example, you make the point about the US-UK relationship. In my view, the UK should have been a preeminent negotiator with the US on some of these questions. And it should have used its proximity and its influence with the United States to understand what US policy is, and to try to mediate that around the world. And I think it's done that to some extent, but it's in the UK's national interest, in my view, to be at the forefront when it comes to all of these trends, because, as you rightly say, the world's changing very rapidly, and there are new trends forthcoming, whether in technology or geopolitics, and I think the UK has a lot to offer there.
You spoke about the immigration policy. Almost every country, not just in the Western Hemisphere, even in our country, we're dealing with this issue. We talk about infiltrators, politicians pick it up. It's a very polarizing topic politically. It also is something that citizens are uncomfortable discussing, even at homes or in public spaces. But it's something that makes everybody worried, especially with AI coming in, taking up jobs, the whole idea that foreigners will take up your jobs, or outsiders will take up your jobs, take up your homes. We can't get rentals. These kind of issues will keep happening. How do you, as a young politician, see Britain shaping that?
Well, the immigration policy of India is a matter for the government of India and for the people of India to decide.
No, I meant in your country, how are you shaping it?
Well, I feel the same way, that the immigration policy of the UK is a matter for the UK government to take its view on. I think the issue in the UK has been that there is an anxiety, an understandable and I think in many ways justified anxiety about some forms of immigration that hasn't been properly reflected in policy by the politicians. And there's been a bit of a disconnect between the decision makers and feeling in the wider voter base, the wider electorate, the people of the UK. And I think that gap is going to close, basically, in very short order. And I think that could be very beneficial for the UK because, as you rightly say, if immigration is a top-tier concern, it can actually be very difficult to get lots of other things done. So you don't really, if you don't have a secure border, if you don't have a clear immigration policy, and you've really thought through as a state what you want and what you don't want from immigration, whether it's economic or otherwise, then it can be very difficult to draw your attention to all the other issues that need solving, because it tends to dominate the political debates, understandably, and it can become a lens through which every other policy is viewed. So I think the quicker the UK resolves what its medium to long-term immigration policy will be in general, the better. The one thing that the UK has struggled with is a continual problem with border security and with the problem of illegal immigration, which is actually a separate question in some ways to its appetite for legal migration. And it's at the top of the agenda, there's no doubt. It's interesting that you say it's also at the top of the agenda in India. I think that's something I hear increasingly when I'm traveling. I don't think it's something that's particular to so-called Western democracies. I think it's an issue now that's actually affecting a lot of states.
Yes, every country is dealing with it now. One question which I want to ask you, which I think you'll have to wear all your three hats, foreign policy, politician, as well as media. And we're talking still about immigration and stuff like that. India's long grappled with this issue that, under the garb is something which is a very sharp comment, but you have these protection of media laws, and under that umbrella, there are some people who do these protests in your country who are seen in India as secessionists and who are promoting secessionism in India. And those protests are quasi-violent. There are people who have attacked the Indian High Commission, burnt the Indian flag, but then it comes under this free speech umbrella in your country. It does harm, at least on the street. Indians do not like the idea, and there's an aggression that Indians have regarding Britain, and it's only because of some elements like this. Is there no way that this can be stemmed in some manner?
I'm certainly familiar with the issue that you're raising. It's something that, again, the domestic internal politics of India are, as an outside observer, like any country in the world, including the UK, they can be complex, and there can be issues in that domestic political picture. I'm afraid my view is that they shouldn't be played out in the streets of the UK. That's my view. Now, notwithstanding the fact that there are important rights in the UK around free speech and the right to protest, which I would always defend, actually, my view is that it's not beneficial for society in general in the UK. And I think this is also something that a lot of younger people are thinking, frankly, for the domestic politics of any country in the world to be played out, for example, in London. I'm sorry, but that's just not what we should be doing anymore. It's not going to be the stage on which every single internecine political issue around the world, of which there are many thousands in every country, London can't be the stage for all of that, I'm afraid. So I think we're going to draw a line on that one soon. There have been some attempts to make sure that those factional issues are not affecting, the kind of everyday peace and stability of the experience in the UK. But it's one of the things I think is very important. That said, it's not for me to take a particular view on any of those issues, because actually I'm a believer that those issues are for Indians to determine. They're not for the British to determine. That said, the security of what's allowed in London and what's allowed in the UK is an issue for the British to determine, in my view.
All right. One question on social media. What is your view about the impact of social media on the population of Britain, on generally what is happening even with the war, and so much of disinformation which is put out there in the social media? Do you feel regulation is the way, or self-regulation, or there's some way to control the amount of disinformation which is out there? Last question, because I think we're running out of time.
Well, it's a happy happenstance that we're both in media, and I find the media economy in India to be completely fascinating, and it's been a wonderful thing at NXT to be around your talented young journalists across all of the channels that are here in India. It's a vibrant media economy, and actually I think the Indian hunger for news is extraordinary. In social media, I can just say a few things that have happened in the past couple of weeks, in fact months. For the first time recently, the number of monthly views or monthly audience for YouTube in the UK exceeded the monthly audience of the BBC as a whole. That's a very big shift for media consumers in the UK. It's now the case that I think 50% or so of the videos that go viral in the UK on YouTube, they look like they have a traditional TV format. So it's almost as if the traditional forum or the traditional setting of a TV news channel is now transposed onto YouTube, and the distribution mechanism has completely changed. And I think that's a technological shift that probably won't reverse.
Do you see an anti-India sentiment in social media or traditional media increasing in Britain, or do you see it balanced?
It's not something I'm happy to say that I've noticed in particular. But the reality is that many of the social media platforms that are most used in Britain, they're not British platforms, they're US platforms, and they're regulated in Britain to an extent, but they're not fully controlled in any sense by the government of the UK. And actually, I'm one of the people who think that that's probably a good thing. There has to be a sensible balance when it comes to regulation. And, if you want my personal view, I think the UK is currently in danger of over-regulating the social media space rather than the opposite problem. The UK has a very long and proud tradition of free media and free speech, and that's a wonderful thing. But I think the thing that hasn't really been understood by the politicians at the moment is that, as we were saying earlier, the platforms have just completely changed. It's going to be the case that many, many more consumers are now going to consume news that's basically AI delivered and AI driven. They will want to have conversations with their chatbots to deliver their media consumption. And I was reading the traditional newspapers here this morning, which were delivered to my hotel room, thinking, I wonder how long it will be before some of those formats are completely revolutionized by AI. It's definitely coming in the UK. And as with everything, a bit like the shift from print to web, it's just about getting the balance right. It's not a technology that can be stopped. And my view of the media is fundamentally a technology business in lots of ways. It always has been dominated by the medium rather than media. And what's happening here in India is fascinating because the pace of change and the pace of adoption of new technologies in the media market in India is fascinating. And organizations such as yours and everybody involved in the NXT Summit, I know, are at the absolute forefront of that, delivering for the Indian media consumers. So it's fascinating as a sort of media thinker, I hope, in the UK to come and see how things are working here in India.
Thank you so much for speaking with us. It's been a great conversation. It's been fun, as well as talking about the alternative reality that we are on the bridge of, on the cusp of. Interesting times we live in. Thank you so much.